Good morning. I'm Jessica Lovell. It is Friday, May 24th, so happy Friday. Today, we are bringing you an encore presentation of an episode of Open Mics with Dr. Stites. It includes some really valuable information about the new and very popular anti-obesity drugs like Wegovy and Ozempic. Then starting next week after Memorial Day, you will be seeing more encore presentations as we begin our summer schedule. You'll still see us here live on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Then in September, after Labor Day, we will be back with daily episodes. But for now, please enjoy this episode of Open Mics with Dr. Stites.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Steve Stites, Chief Medical Officer here at the University of Kansas Health System. Welcome back to Open Mics with Dr. Stites. Today, we're focusing on perhaps the most talked about in-demand medications of the past couple of years: Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and other GLP-1 drugs. I'm just going to say GLP-1 so you know that. These were originally approved as diabetes treatments, and they're very successful, but they're increasingly being used as anti-obesity drugs and maybe heart drugs. It's nice to have a new option for the million of Americans living with obesity, but also with diabetes and maybe some heart disease. However, the supply of these GLP-1 drugs simply is not meeting demand. Today we're asking, what should a patient do while they wait for the supply to improve? We've got a full house today discussing these GLP-1 drugs. I'm joined immediately on my right by Dr. Rick Coldry, our Vice President of Pharmacy and Health Professions here at the University of Kansas Health System. We office close together. I give him a hard time routinely. That's a lot of fun. It's like a sport. Dr. Johanna Peterson is an internal medicine specialist who sometimes prescribes these drugs while working at the health system's Center for Weight Management and Physical Activity. Welcome to our program today. On the academic side, we have two researchers. Dr. Steve Herman is the director of the University of Kansas Weight Management Program. Sir, welcome to you. Good morning. And okay, here we go. It's right in my script. Dr. John Tifo leads Casey Moore, the Kansas City Center, or the University of Kansas Center for Metabolism and Obesity and Research. Welcome back to our program. You've been here before, mostly on Zoom, as we were talking about earlier. Joining us remotely is Cliff Irwin. Now, you don't know Cliff, but you know Cliff because he's part of our studio team here at KU. He works behind the scenes here in the Dolph C. Simons Jr. Family Broadcast Studio, but he's here today to share a patient's perspective. Cliff, we're going to hear about your story in just a second. First, let's establish what these drugs are and how they work. Dr. Peterson, talk to us a little bit about these medicines and how you describe them when you're talking with patients.
Absolutely, thank you. Obesity was formally classified as a disease by the American Medical Association about 10 years ago.
Which was a big deal.
Yes, a really big deal.
Yeah.
Changes the way that we think about it and the way that a lot of people view obesity. It's not a lack of willpower, not a lack of effort. It's a disease that we can effectively treat just like we do hypertension, diabetes, and the other things that we see in clinical medicine. The GLP-1 class of medications have really been a game changer in the treatment for obesity. And what they do is they mimic our GLP-1 hormone that we have, and they do it even a little bit more effectively than our own GLP-1 hormone. So when I'm talking to patients about this medication, I talk about how the medicine works and how it will support them in their weight loss journey, and then side effects. And so GLP-1 is a hormone that is made in our intestine, and it affects various different systems in our body, but specifically related to obesity and weight loss. Where it's really impactful is how it affects our brain and how it affects the hunger signals and neural pathways in our brain that regulate appetite, that regulate satiety. Patients on these medications tell me, I don't have food noise. I'm not always thinking about what I'm going to eat. I'm not always thinking about how much I should eat, or, I should be full, but I want a little bit more. This medication makes it easier if someone's eating their favorite meal to box half of it up and take it home. And that's the experience that most people have on these with these medications. It also helps with managing hunger and the way that it impacts our digestive system. It slows down digestion in our stomach, in our intestines, in our colon. And so if you think about it, if food sits in your stomach a little bit longer, that improves satiety. If you have a big meal and it takes longer to transit through your GI tract, you feel a bit more full. So this medicine does slow gastric emptying, and that's where we see some of the side effects and some of the news stories talking about some of the downsides of this medication. I would say for most patients I see, these side effects are pretty mild. Food is sitting longer in your stomach, people experience nausea, sometimes bloating, sometimes just overall not feeling well. I think that it's maybe similar to kind of first trimester morning sickness, and that is also a spectrum. For some people that's very severe, but just kind of like not feeling super great. And for most people that lasts a day or so. And then, they kind of get back to feeling more normal. Another thing that we really, talk about and, preemptively come up with a plan for is if someone has constipation. That's something that we see too. If it slows down food moving through your stomach, it can also slow down, stools and moving through your colon. So, those side effects are things that not certainly everyone has, and if they do, they're typically mild, but there are strategies that we can use to manage those. Overall, these medications are really great because we can use them in patients that are very medically complex. They're safe to use in patients that have advanced liver disease, advanced heart disease, or on dialysis. They don't have interactions with most commonly prescribed medications.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like they're really effective. And just a note, I'm old enough to have been around when we used fen-phen and thought, oh, this helps people lose weight. Yeah. And it helped promote heart disease and other problems with pulmonary hypertension and heart valvular disease. These drugs actually have a good effect for the heart.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, very exciting. November of last year, the results of the SELECT trial were released. And what this study looked at is patients who have obesity but do not have diabetes, but have pre-existing cardiovascular diseases. So patients that have had a stroke, that have had a heart attack in the past, or that have peripheral vascular disease, maybe have had amputations due to poor blood flow. And what this study found is that there was a 20% risk or 20% decrease in major cardiovascular events such as cardiovascular death, heart attacks, and strokes.
That's a really big deal. Yeah. So there is, however, a major supply problem. Rick Coldry directs our pharmacy. So Rick, that's your fault, and I'm going to blame you for it. But talk to us about why that's true. Why is there such a big supply problem? What's going on with that? And
fortunately, Steve, when I come on the show, we have complicated topics, but this is a pretty easy one to understand. Demand outpaces supply. Yeah. That is really the cornerstone of what we're behind. We have over 1,000 patients waiting on backorder medications right now. And I know we're going to have someone share their story here in a little bit about what the impacts that are, but it's a big problem.
And people have got to be trying to ramp up the manufacturing of these drugs. Mm-hmm. That's a complicated process. The FDA closely regulates manufacturing facilities. You can't just say, well, I'm going to open up a new plant, but there's a lot of steps around that. When do you think that the supply problem might ease?
Well, all the manufacturers are ramping up product. As we know, they are incentivized by selling more drugs, so they're not waiting on it. There's two things that are happening. The demand is going up. The FDA is approving more indications for these drugs, so that expands more people that can get the medications, and then that also increases demand. So that's really what the effect is. They're trying to catch up. They just can't get there. There's some hope as more products enter the market because there's different. We listed off some of them at the beginning of the show, different drugs in this class, but it's going to be a while. There's a lot, and I'm sure one of our other colleagues today has better information than me, but there's a lot of patients out there who could benefit through these drugs that are not even being seen yet.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. But let's hear from Cliff. Cliff, you've been seeing providers at the health system's weight management program. When did you first start taking one of the GLP-1 drugs? What was your experience like?
So I started taking the GLP-1 drugs back in the spring of 2022. I had gone to our weight management clinic, and after seeing my primary care physician, I had struggled with weight over the years, and I'm sure the pandemic didn't help out, but I had topped out over 300 pounds, and I knew there was something I needed to do. I needed to change. I wanted to live a better life, not just for me, but for my family, and so she recommended that I try an option like GLP-1, and so I actually started on Mounjaro, and I was on that for at least 6 months with working out, and saw great benefits from it. Definitely curtailed my appetite. Didn't make me think about going to get a snack even though I wasn't hungry, and had a great result. I actually ended up losing in the first year or so, I had lost about 50 pounds.
That's awesome. And how long have you been on these drugs altogether?
So I've had to bounce drugs. So I was on Mounjaro. I was barely pre-diabetic when I first started. So I was approved, and then the insurance, once I wasn't pre-diabetic anymore after I had checkups, I got a letter in the mail that said, we're no longer covering this for you.
So you did too well. You did too good. That's really great. Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
I love healthcare in America. Go ahead.
Exactly. And then, so luckily I was able to get Wegovy. And so I started on Wegovy. And there I kind of plateaued a little bit. I had a little bit of a space between the two. But I continued to work out and try to change my habits, because that was the mindset too. Working with my physician at the weight management clinic and my registered dietitian, was curtailing not only my hunger, but choosing the right foods and the right portion sizes. So that it all factored into that. But I got onto Wegovy, and I was on that for up until January of this year. And then I got another letter in the mail that said, hey, if you want to continue this is going to be, this much money a month, and I couldn't afford that. So working with my physician again, looked at other options, and Zepbound just happened to be coming onto the market or approved by the FDA. And so I got on that list, and then there was the supply chain issue. So I started rationing my last 4 doses of Wegovy and made them last through the middle of March. So I was actually, instead of taking it every week, ended up taking it every other week. And then the last one I kind of held on to for a month, which is probably not recommended, but I was trying to get the most out of my medication. And I finally got approved in March for Zepbound, but it didn't. It finally came in 2 weeks ago. So.
All right. So you're back on therapy, and how's that going so far?
So far, so good. I've actually got one right here. Today is my shot day.
Awesome. And, nice camera shot of your shot day. It's like you work in the studio or something.
Maybe, I don't know. It's worked well. I can start. My hunger pains were coming back when I came off of Wegovy, and I was doing the best I could mentally and working with my registered dietitian to curtail it, find healthier options throughout the day, how to eat. And I felt like it did a good job. I did gain some weight back, but I didn't go back to where I started. So I felt like that was a win. And now I'm feeling like I did before when I was on the medication, where I could manage it better throughout the day, where sometimes I do have to remind myself, hey, you know what? You haven't eaten anything in 4 or 5 hours. You should eat a little something so you don't get lightheaded or, pass out, especially when I'm carrying a camera on stories for the show.
Yeah, that would be good, since sometimes you have to put up with me like that. So, well, listen, congratulations on that outstanding experience. I want to talk to Dr. Herman for just a minute. Hearing Cliff's experience, it sounds like he's not just relying on one single bullet or magic bullet for weight loss. How important is this multifaceted program he's got? He's talked to a dietitian, he's been working out, he was more careful about what he eats. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of that.
Yeah, and I think like Dr. Peterson said, we understand obesity is a very complex disease. And so the providers in our group can put a patient on the right path, the right treatment plan for them. And generally that treatment plan includes some other health and wellness, nutrition, activity programming. And so whether that's meeting with the registered dietitians one-on-one, some of our group settings, or even cash pay programs, those programs will help patients identify, like you said, high quality foods to eat, improve our nutrition, be active. Those things are helpful regardless if we lose weight. If we can improve those things, we can improve health in a lot of areas. And so I think Cliff did a great job of making sure he's understanding this bigger picture. The other thing it gives us, from a research space and in the clinical space, is really a paradigm shift in how we talk with patients about managing their weight and their nutrition. In the past, the focus was on reducing calories and trying to help people feel full. And now we have some really effective drugs that can do that part. And so some of the conversations shift to making sure we have foundational nutrition. So there's some patients, like Cliff just mentioned, just don't feel hungry and realize that they've gone 4 or 5 hours without eating anything. And we also know that we need a certain level of protein in our diet. It can help maintain muscle and potentially offset some of the muscle loss that might happen with some of these medications. Exercising and being active can help maintain or build muscle. And so all of those health behaviors can make a big difference. And then if there is a period where the supply chain issue impacts the medication they have, they can start relying on some of those other health behaviors to maybe manage and weather that storm a little bit more effectively.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that term, food noise. I hadn't heard that before. That is true. I mean, you do it. And as you get older, I think it gets harder, actually. At least I heard a lot of those voices now. I didn't hear those voices when I was a few years ago. All right, so there are thousands of people who are waiting on some of those drugs. We've heard about the stories, but Dr. Tifo, tell us a little bit about the research going on here with Casey Moore.
In Casey Moore, there is research focused on GLP-1 agonist. We're really interested, and other people in our team, our larger Casey Moore team, are really interested in the rapid skeletal muscle mass loss that occurs on these drugs. And so if you lose a lot of muscle mass, that can negatively impact your function and your metabolism. And after all, the ultimate goal is to have healthy aging and be functional, right? And so there is some concern there, and so there's been some studies proposed and started looking at ensuring that people do either aerobic or resistance exercise to help maintain that muscle mass, but we'll see if that is effective. Big Pharma is actually coming out with drugs that you'll take with the GLP-1 agonist to prevent the muscle mass loss, and I just think that that's short-sighted. And so that's my concern as a physiologist and someone that studies exercise and metabolism, is that we don't forget these fundamental tenets that you need to maintain your activity, maintain your strength and your physical function. This isn't just a one-tool thing to treat obesity. But yeah, that's one big focus. And then we have another investigator who really tries to study why the altered food signals occur. What is the disruptions in satiety? And one of our investigators, Matt Morris, has a really interesting study showing that altered liver metabolism affects neuronal signaling to the brain and affects satiety. And exercise will actually help maintain that appropriate signal from the liver to the brain. So that's some of the highlights.
Yeah, that's a really big deal to think about like that. But there are some side effects with the skeletal muscle loss and other ways to go about that. So, Dr. Peterson, what do you tell patients about exercise, and how do you make sure they don't have skeletal muscle loss? And that's, by the way, for those out there, that's kind of most of the muscles in our body, those muscles that help you do bicep curls and make us look cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one important thing about exercise is I have a lot of patients tell me, I've been working out with a personal trainer. I've been working out really hard at the gym and I haven't lost weight. And so I stopped. If I'm not losing weight, what's the point? And so just changing that mindset to exercise not being tied to the number on the scale. Exercise is important. Even if someone doesn't lose a pound, it will improve their health. So just trying to reframe exercise. And then a lot of people will also say, I just don't feel motivated. And I think a lot of us fall in that category, aside from those who run marathons or bodybuilders or personal trainers. And most people don't want to set their alarm and wake up to work out, or would rather go to, happy hour with their friends than go for a run. And so, I think just acknowledging that it's not a personal failure if you don't feel motivated to work out. And, encouraging patients to maybe, schedule some exercise in their day like they would in an appointment or a meeting. Look at your week, find a time when you think it would work for you, pick an activity that you enjoy, and just try to make it a habit and a routine.
So I'm going to throw this out to the panel. You guys just kind of all, whoever wants to pick it up. If you're fat, it's your own fault. You're not working out. You're not eating too much. Is that outdated? Is that no longer the story?
Yeah, I think it's outdated.
Talk to us.
Well, I think there's been so many environmental changes. It's not that our physiology or our genetics has changed in the last 100 years. It's that our environment has changed. So the food has become more addictive or more or more, delicious.
You mean the fact that food companies want to put salt and fat on everything to make it taste good? Lay's potato chips.
Yeah, there's some great stories about how they developed the Cheez-It or the Dorito to have this optimal taste and crunch. And we drink so many more calories as well. That's a big problem, is drinking calories. And it starts with little, toddlers drinking apple juice all day. I mean, so there's just all these different behavioral changes or environmental changes that have forced behavioral changes that add up both on the physical activity side and on the consumption side that have led us to where we are today. So to say it's someone's fault is really short-sighted when it's 70% of the population now is obese or overweight. That suggests right there it's something with the environment that has changed.
Yeah. So what does happen as we get older? Is our weight supposed to change, or are we supposed to look just as thin and cool as we did when we were younger?
Well, as we age, our metabolism changes, and one of the things that we mentioned earlier is that if we can maintain our muscle, or maybe early in life, if we can increase some of our muscle mass, and as we lose weight, maintain it, we're going to age more with greater amount of function, and that can help maintain our metabolism. So we know that exercise and continued exercise can actually help us maintain our weight loss. So doing it to lose weight initially can be challenging sometimes, but doing it with the purpose of fulfillment and enjoyment and long-term health benefits is really the way to reframe that.
Yeah, my wife tells me if I am not exercising, I'm a bad person. So 5 days a week, I have to be upstairs doing some kind of workout or going to the gym or taking a walk, do whatever, because otherwise I'm not as good a person. We know many of you have questions. Let's head to Studio B with Alexis.
We have so many questions coming in about this topic. Jean writes, what kind of money are we talking about for these drugs without insurance? And are there any options to defray the cost? So when you say it's expensive without insurance, how expensive?
All right, he's going to talk about that one.
$1,000 to $2,000 a month, right?
I'm going to say that's what you're exactly right.
Yeah.
It's about $1,000 to $2,000 a month cash out of pocket. Most of the drugs have a copay card from an insurance company. They'll pay around $200 or so you can lower the cost a bit. And pretty much, again, drug companies are incentivized to get more people on their drugs, so pretty much everybody is eligible for these cards.
But because they want you on the drug, and then they stop the copay cards, and then you're stuck on the drug, and it works. You think, I got to stay on the drug somehow.
Yeah, the copay cards are going to last for a few years, though. I wouldn't worry about that just yet. But
Okay.
you're correct.
So that is a lot of money, and unfortunately, that also is American healthcare. And another discussion we can have sometime, Alexis, on this program is how do drug companies establish the cost of a drug? All right.
Kristen Markway Shaw has a question about compounding pharmacy. She asks, given the shortages of these medications, what's the recommendation on using compounding pharmacies to get generic versions of these GLP-1 drugs?
You can get a generic version. It's not necessarily the same drug, Rick.
I would be extremely cautious. I think even saying that it's a generic version of the same product is incorrect. That is not right. And I just don't know that you can guarantee what those products are or how they're going to work. So I would be very, very cautious. Personally, wouldn't do it myself. That's where I'm seeing a lot of head shaking no.
Dr. Peterson.
We don't recommend that patients use compounding medications. We don't prescribe them. I understand why people do with the cost of these medications, with how impactful they can be in treating obesity. But, this is something that you inject into your body. It's a peptide protein hormone. It's not like some medications that you get at a compounding pharmacy where you're crushing up pills that are from a drug company and making, 2 pills into one. And so I think that the risks and not knowing what you're using and not having that assurance is dangerous.
It's a little, and I saw you shaking your head too, Dr. Chifa.
Oh yeah, and it can't be that much cheaper. I mean, they're going to want to make a profit as well, the compounding pharmacies.
Yeah.
So
It's a little challenging. One of my patients is doing this, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm practicing cystic fibrosis. We've been compounding drugs for years because there weren't many drugs for CF, so we're very familiar with the process and how it happens. There's usually a few small studies out there that at least tried it and with some group of patients, but when you start compounding things that no one else is doing, you just got to be really careful with that, because essentially you're not taking a drug that's been studied and you're responsible for all the side effects of that.
April Collins has a message for Cliff. Cliff, April writes, "Congratulations, Cliff, way to go."
Thank you.
We all
So,
feel the
Cliff,
same way. We know you've been working so hard.
You have worked hard. I just want to say, I remember seeing those pictures of you on your scouting activities with your son, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that going a little better now with exercise and weight loss? How much better is that?
It definitely is. I get around a little better. I can feel a difference, and definitely that's one of my short-term goals. Next summer we're going to Philmont Scout Ranch, which is a huge ranch out in northeast New Mexico for the Scouts, and you hike in the Rockies. And not only do I want to meet the weight requirement to go out into the mountains, but climbing those mountains at elevation, I'm going to need some strength and conditioning, and so that's definitely part of the goal, to lose this weight in the short term.
Weight loss with exercise, nutrition, and GLP-1. I like it. All right,
And
Alexis.
We're witnesses to how hard Cliff works, just to let everyone know. I mean, he comes into work, we're complaining about being tired, and he says, yeah, I've been up since 4:45. Today was my leg day. So he religiously is working at this. Jeremy has a question. Jeremy wants to know, who is the ideal patient this will help? I think losing some weight and getting healthier is such a common concern, but how do you know that you're one of the people that the medication is the right path for?
Dr. Herman? Dr. Pat Peterson?
Sure. So these medications are approved for anyone who has a BMI greater than 30 or a BMI of 27 with a medical comorbidity such as hypertension, diabetes, prediabetes, cholesterol issues. And so, patients with obesity are candidates for this medication. If someone is interested and meets those requirements combined with physical activity and nutrition, I think that they would certainly be a candidate. We have some patients who want to engage in some nutritional changes, exercise program to see where they land before starting a medication in the GLP-1 class, and that's fine too.
All right.
Aaron has a question. Aaron writes, I use an injectable once a week for diabetes. I'm off of insulin for more than 2 years now. Hodgkin's lymphoma survivor too. So his question is, does having a history of blood cancer affect absorption of these medications?
Oh, that's a big question. Just a little more detail there.
That is a big question.
We're looking around the table. I don't know why I would, because it's your injectable. I think it's an injectable. I think you're going to absorb it. So exactly.
I think that's right.
And your liver works, so you're not as worried about how it's being metabolized. So, I mean, I think most of the injectables, we don't get too nervous about things like that unless you've got some sort of a skin condition, et cetera. And even then, the key is to get it below the dermis, and then you can get things injected pretty well.
Marie has a question. Marie wants to know, does the drug make you, this is for Cliff, does the drug make you feel sick if you eat really fatty foods? And then what would happen if you pushed past your feeling of fullness?
Great questions.
I haven't felt anything with fatty foods. I still eat some from time to time, especially on campouts. You kind of can't avoid it sometimes. But as far as the fullness goes, it's portion control no matter how you look at it. When I first started on it, I was still overeating a little bit, and you could tell I did feel really full. I mean, to the point of, it's almost like after a Thanksgiving dinner that you ate too much food and you just want to lay down and kind of get some relief. But so it kind of quickly teaches you to portion control. Otherwise, you're not going to feel very good.
Interesting.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a great discussion. I mean, a great discussion. And I'm thankful to all of our guests for having been here today. I know you guys all have a lot of things to do. I do want to hear final thoughts, though, from each person before we go. Cliff, I'm going to start with you.
I think for my final thought is I'm glad there's things like these GLP-1 drugs to help guide patients like me to live a healthier life. But I also would caution people to just rely on those, as we've discussed, diet, exercise, the medication. I was somebody that came in initially that didn't want to get on any kind of medication. I wanted to do it on my own, and I realized that I needed that assistance, and it's okay to get that assistance, and it's been a great journey, and I hope it continues. And like I said, my goal is to live a longer, healthy life, not only for myself, but for my family. So hopefully for people out there that are in the same boat, they're able to get the medication that helps them out on their journey.
All right, that's a pretty darn good thing. Rick Coldry, by the way, get the dry spruce. Let's go.
Thank you. I got two things that came to mind during our discussion today. One is what we don't really know is what are the long-term effects of being on these medications. And I'm just curious about what kind of programs or support or other things can we evolve or put into place to get patients to a healthy weight and healthy behaviors, and then can we get the medications off of them? And because affordability is a big thing that came up today. That's a big challenge. It's a big problem. And then just thinking for a minute about the compounding pharmacy question, I would say if you're going to spend money on that, can you get to a registered dietitian for your money first and learn something about healthy food and healthy eating? Those folks are awesome. I think they're underutilized and they're readily available. Sometimes they're in your local grocery store and you can have a good conversation and get started.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Tifo.
I like to highlight again Dr. Peterson's point about disassociating physical activity and exercise from weight. That exercise is really critical for your mental health. It actually helps with your energy balance and your energy intake regulation, but it also is optimally needed for healthy aging and physical function. And the second thing I'd like to put out there is, what is a healthy weight? If someone's gotten up to 300, 350 pounds, should we be trying to get them down to 180, or should we just be trying to get some level of weight loss and then maintain that weight for the rest of their life with healthier habits on top of it, and their cardiovascular risk and everything else is going to go down? Because there is a lot of weight yo-yoing that can occur, and I worry about people setting, my own family, my mom used to do this. The goal was always way too low, and then she would rebound back. And so that's the second thing I'd like to put out there.
Yeah, really important to think about those things as you go along that part of the journey. Dr. Herman.
Yeah, I think a couple things. Like Cliff said, it's not easy. It's not easy to get started. I think across the country there's millions of people that are looking for help. They've been trying things and haven't seen the results that they hope for. These medications do give some hope to patients, but we also want to reinforce that if that's something that can get them started and get some momentum, that they can have a team around them, a physician and nurses and registered dietitians or health educators or personal trainers, but other people that they can surround themselves with to really leverage the best of those medications into other healthy habits. And so if you're looking for programs and trying to find a place where you can get a medication like this, make sure that program has some of that added support.
Yeah, well said. All right, Dr. Peterson.
Yeah, I want to echo what Cliff and Dr. Herman discussed. Obesity is a medical disease like other medical diseases that we treat. It's not a personal failure. It's not that someone's not self-disciplined or not trying hard enough. And this is a really exciting time in the treatment of obesity with these medications, and then the other pillars of support we have, like physical activity, good nutrition, and the shortages are frustrating. The lack of insurance coverage is frustrating, but with time and drug development and ways and strategies to hopefully make these more affordable, I hope that obesity treatment will be available to more people who struggle.
I think our society has had a history of a little bit of fat shaming.
Absolutely.
And I think the medical profession has been guilty of that. And I think there have been times in my clinic I've not done a great job around that. And as you listen to where we are today with our understanding of obesity, to your point, if 70% of people have it, it's more than just willpower. This is a question of, we have a lot of it. We can see the same thing in many of the risk factors around cardiac disease and cancer. So much of our environment shapes how we are. And I think we have to have a reckoning between industry, health, nutrition, and start really talking and having that conversation. But what does it mean to be a healthy eater? And what does it mean to make sure we treat obesity as a disease and not as a personal fault? Hey, thanks again to all of our guests and to our audience. Remember, we said it before, faith, hope, and science, it can lead to remarkable things like new treatments for a medical disease called obesity. We'll see you soon.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now everywhere podcasts are available.